start this hour with our special coverage of the referendum in the Donbas republics and two breakaway Ukrainian regions, as the voting has finished and the ballots are now being counted to determine whether they will join Russia. As the polling stations have now closed after several days of accepting ballots, let's take a look at the numbers we have. The first final results of the referendum have come in from the Kherson region, where 96.75% voted in favor of joining Russia. That's as preliminary data in the Donetsk Republic shows 98.63% cast their ballots in favor. That figure in the Zaporizhia region was 92.91%, and the Lugansk Republic 97.87%. The head of the Lugansk Republic says the results testify to the unity of the people there.
The most important thing is that the referendum took place and we cast our votes. As in the distant 2014, we united and showed our unity to the whole world, despite the fact that the Ukrainian nationalists did everything to prevent the referendum from taking place. They intimidated people. They shot at us. The ballots for the referendum, in which we voted for joining Russia, are now being counted.
RT's Igor Zhdanov in the Lugansk Republic and Roman Kosarev in Donetsk brought us the details about the referendum results being tallied.
The 5-day voting process is now over. The voting areas have now been closed and the count had begun. Now, we already know that the turnout at this referendum was very high. The first 4 days of the voting took place with referendum committees walking around from home to home, asking people to cast their ballots. And now we find ourselves at the information center here in Donetsk People's Republic. It's working, well, I can't say 24/7, but it's working well into the late nights, and this is where the results, the final results, will be announced. We're expecting to hear something by about 10 o'clock Moscow time in the evening, but judging from what we have seen so far in the counting of the votes, the results will be overwhelming in favor of joining Russia.
No one forces us to come. You can see it yourself. People come voluntarily. I'm so happy. I'm about to cry.
People were crying with joy. There were people from the Russian-controlled territories in Ukraine who said, "This day has finally come. I'm so glad I lived to see this day."
I'm really happy. We've come a long way and I've been waiting for it for ages.
Those were some of the voters that I spoke with over the last 5 days of the voting. Once again, they came out en masse to show their support, to do their civic duty, if you will. Now, many of them had tears in their eyes. They were waiting for this day for the last 8 years, and it's finally arrived.
Well, this place is the new heart of the referendum here in the Lugansk People's Republic. This is the place where all the information, all the results from every single election committee flock to, and this is where they're being made public at the screen over there. And indeed, here it is, the atmosphere is quite celebratory. The referendum came and is successful despite all efforts of the Kiev government, of the Kiev military, who were trying to intimidate the local population here as much as possible, to make them stay at home and not come to vote. Despite all that, people here are happy. People here can't wait to finally see and find out the final figures. And this is the reality you won't really see on the Western media, won't see on your TVs if you're living in Europe, for example. According to them, this referendum is a forced one. For example, according to the take of the German foreign minister, this referendum here and all others were happening at gunpoint. This vote, it did happen at gunpoint. The guns were pointing from the side of the Kiev forces, and again, I can't reiterate this enough, they were shelling civilian infrastructure, they were shelling people's homes and houses and, well, trying to make them stay at home, trying to scare them into not voting. Again, this did not happen, but our crew did prepare a report on this. Here you go. Kiev has repeatedly claimed ownership over the citizens of Donbass and at the same time has been doing everything in its power to antagonize them. Its military has been shelling the population here with howitzers and heavy rocket launchers. Planes dropped bombs on people's homes and children. And now the authorities in Kiev are making it abundantly clear that anyone who is dropping ballots into the ballot boxes at the referendum will be persecuted with no mercy.
Ukraine proposed up to 5 years in prison for anyone who dares to vote, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of repression. There's a plethora of ways to lose all humanity in Kiev's eyes here and be condemned with the stigma of being a so-called Russian collaborator.
This can mean a prison sentence of up to 5 years, so I strongly advise the residents of the temporarily occupied territories: do not take a Russian passport, do not go to referendums, and do not cooperate with the occupiers.
8 years of war have somewhat numbed the people here to the outright abhorrence coming from Kiev's government, which considers them its subjects. But while they're used to it, it doesn't mean they aren't heartbroken.
It's such a bitter feeling when your motherland turns its back on you. Well, the land you had always thought to be your motherland. It's very sad.
I am so angered by this, but this is war. That's all I can say.
We aren't living in Ukraine. We are living in the Lugansk Republic, and we do hope they won't be able to get their hands on us.
And sure, all these threats could have been a bluff, grandstanding at an international level, a trick in Ukraine's domestic policy game. But Kiev itself shattered all hopes of that by cracking down ruthlessly on the population of the areas abandoned by Russia's forces.
All collaborators who somehow reveal their names, there is a whole list of the surnames. They are all people who have signed their death sentences. We are not bloodthirsty. We are officially saying that we'll only accept a legal decision. Life sentences for traitors.
We are alarmed by the numerous reports of the so-called filtration activities carried out by the Ukrainian security services and armed neo-Nazi formations in the territories left by the Allied forces as part of their regrouping. Thousands of people are affected by this. It is frightening to imagine what the Ukrainian armed forces are doing to them now. We're first and foremost talking about these people being killed.
As citizens of the Donbass flock to the polling stations in the millions, it's not just Ukraine that remains oblivious to their plea. Germany's top diplomat, Annalena Baerbock, outdid Kiev's own propagandists when she suggested the real situation with the vote here resembles a poorly written R-rated movie.
People are voting with a gun pointing at their heads, and this is exactly what such referendums are about. People are shot at, raped, and then obliged to vote while a soldier armed with a Kalashnikov is standing right next to them. If we now accept it and let it be, then it will be repeated in other places. It will serve as an invitation to further violate international laws.
As Western politicians and media push the narrative of a people voting at gunpoint, reality on the ground points to a very different threat facing those wanting to cast their vote at polling stations.
Public areas in the Donbass are being shelled by the Ukrainian military every day. Kiev's undercover hitmen bomb pro-Russian officials and liberated regions on a regular basis. Diversion groups are also active behind the defensive lines. But the German foreign minister chose to omit all of that. It doesn't fit Ukraine's heroic facade promoted so hard in the West.
They're locked into this narrative, and it's been ongoing since 2014, that the people of the Donbass have no agency of their own, that they are essentially automatons doing Putin's bidding. So that was obvious that that's how the West would interpret any election or referendum outcome. The problem is that they haven't come up with any evidence of this. Show us the evidence that people are being forced at gunpoint to go and vote. There isn't any.
About a quarter of the population here are holders of Russian passports. Just under 1 million people whom Ukraine is eager to evict to the 21st century gulags. And that's to start with. Under the proposed bill, drawn up in co-authorship with members of the Azov neo-Nazi group, freedom of speech goes out of the window. Support every whim of Ukraine's government or be jailed.
Collaborators will be considered those citizens who have denied the armed aggression against Ukraine and the occupation of its territories, or have publicly called for support for the aggressor, for cooperation with the occupiers.
The final and the most decisive day of the referendum is here. And it's about to show just how many people have decided to personally sign their divorce papers with Ukraine once and for all. Amiga Zhdanov reporting from the Lugansk People's Republic, RT.
Around 1.5 million people had cast their votes in the Donetsk Republic by the end of the fourth day of voting. In the Lugansk Republic, the latest data shows the turnout exceeded 90%, while in the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions, the turnout was roughly the same at 63 and 66% respectively. We spoke to the president of the BRICS International Forum, Purnima Anand, who came to the Donbass as an international observer. She says the mood of people there contradicts the Western establishment narrative.
I found that people about whom we were hearing that they are under the gunpoint or they are having control by the Russian army, we found that they are very free. They are participating in the referendum like a celebration and festival. They are really giving message to the world that there is no fear, no any pressure, and they are taking their own right. Even Russian government did not participate. They only provided logistic and infrastructure to the Lugansk and Donetsk people to conduct the voting. When you come to the real grounds, then you will understand what is the reality. From United Nations office, you cannot say everything. So this is not fact, whatever in international media is going on, and it is most of the time there is a fake news. During last 9 months we observed that so many fake news circulated to the by the Western media to Eastern world and whole world.
Also, we've got reactions on the referendum from 2 Greek politicians who visited St. Petersburg to promote strengthening ties between Russia and the EU member state.
I believe the current referendums are fair. We speak about a territory in which the population has faced genocide, the risk of being completely erased. The referendums on whether to join Russia were a matter of survival for them. They didn't have much choice. Ukraine, for its part, did have a choice. To avoid the referendums, they only had to respect the rights of the Russian population of Ukraine, their language and autonomy, their right to exist. However, they persecuted the Russian population, making them flee abroad. They acted against themselves.
I think it's sure that all of the West will say that they don't recognize the results and they are not worth of speaking about them. Maybe we will not find even the results in the Western press.
A terrorist attack on a polling station in the city of Mariupol was thwarted as an employee saw a woman dropping a bag that turned out to contain explosives. That's according to local authorities in the Donetsk Republic. The woman was detained and she admitted that she had been promised money to commit the attack. With voting now wrapped up, we'll keep you updated on the results and what the future holds for these regions.